Welcome to Three Devs and a Maybe, the podcast series for beginner web developers and general web enthusiasts. Now, introducing your show hosts, Michael Budd, Fraser Hart, Lewis Keynes, and Ed Mann.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Three Devs and Maybe. I'm joined today with my usual co-host, Ed Mann.
Hello.
Lewis Keynes.
Good evening.
Fraser Hart is still away, unfortunately. We haven't had much contact, but we believe he's still alive.
He's still in
somewhere
Las Vegas. So he's
somewhere. And more importantly, we are very, very excited to have Taylor Otwell on the show. Hi, Taylor.
Hey.
Hey, thank you so much for coming on and giving up your spare time to come and talk to us today.
No problem.
Really appreciate it. So I guess probably best place to kick off. Usually we go around and discuss what everyone's been up to in the week in programming terms, but we want to kind of get as much out of you this episode, and kind of we've got loads of questions for you. So we'll pretty just kick straight off. But I was wondering if we could start off really by if you wanted to introduce yourself and some of the projects you've been involved with, that kind of stuff.
Okay. Well, like we mentioned, I'm Taylor Otwell, and I live in Arkansas in the United States, which is kind of in the middle of the United States, in the really hot part of the United States. And I've been programming for about 7 or 8 years now. When I graduated from college, I got my first programming job with a big trucking company here in the U.S., and I did primarily .NET and both VB.NET and C#, and then also it was a big enterprise business, so we had a lot of COBOL actually too.
Oh, wow. COBOL.
Yeah. So that was my intro into programming. And then a couple of years into that, I wanted to kind of hack on some side ideas, just kind of startup ideas I had. And .NET is kind of a beast to host, and it's not really as common for, just like a single person to launch a .NET startup, I don't think. But PHP was really popular, and I knew a little bit of it from college, so I started dabbling in PHP. And then messed with a few frameworks, and then basically, like most PHP developers, it seems like wrote my own framework and threw it out there, and I named it Laravel, and I tried to give it really good documentation from the start so that people would be able to use it, and it's kind of grew in popularity ever since.
So it wasn't really your, when you first started it wasn't really your objective at that time for it to be as big as what it is now? It was just kind of a personal project that kind of escalated?
Yeah, sort of. I didn't know how big it would be, and I was okay if no one else used it. It was mainly for my personal projects, and so it was totally fine with me if it was just me. I mean, of course, I had kind of hoped it would be useful to other people, but it's so hard to gauge, just kind of throwing an open source project out there. But kind of one of the big keys was just making it easy to use, and if I knew if it was very easy to get into and very easy to adopt, that probably it would gain at least some users.
Sure. And
sorry, Mike. Go on.
Oh no, go Lee, go for it.
No, I was going to say because I've dabbled with making my own framework recently as well, and I've messed around quite a lot with Laravel and CodeIgniter. Those are the main two that I've used. But the reason that I chose to make my own one is because I felt like I wanted to have more of an understanding of how frameworks work generally. So is that kind of the same kind of path with you, or did you just want to kind of create your own environment to develop in, or?
Well, yeah, I think it's a few things, really. Just creating your own framework can be fun anyway. So it's just kind of a fun project to hack on because it's kind of your brainchild. But then also there were a lot of ideas I had from .NET that I wanted to use in PHP. So like I was using CodeIgniter actually to begin with when I first started doing PHP. But I wanted the templating to work a little bit different because I really like the Razor engine in .NET, and then I wanted my controllers to come out of the IOC container like I was used to in .NET. So it was just kind of bringing a lot of those ideas over and kind of actually to back up to start with, I actually tried to just build like a CodeIgniter extension or like a plugin that I could release that would bring a lot of what are now Laravel's features into CodeIgniter, but I had to kind of hack the core of the framework so much that it wasn't really possible to do it cleanly. So I kind of had to break it off and make it its own thing.
Sure. How soon, sort of, from when you first started making it, did it start getting properly picked up then?
Let's see. It took me a few months to write it, I would say, and the main some of the tougher parts to write were, of course, like the database ORM is one of the bigger, more challenging pieces. And but I would say, even from the first day, I had somewhat of a decent response, I guess. I posted it on Reddit and a website called Forest, which is not really as heavily used anymore, but it got a pretty good response, and I was excited that I think it got 100 downloads the first day, which was awesome to me.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Wow.
So
it was looking good from day one then, really.
yeah, it was. I think it just came at a really opportune time. Like CodeIgniter was kind of starting to decline a little bit, not. It was kind of heading that direction because there was
CodeIgniter. Rest in peace.
Yeah, there was definitely some question, as to the future of it, and that's why people like Phil Sturgeon and Dan Horrigan and their crew had started that Fuel framework. I think because they kind of saw the same thing I did, that CodeIgniter was sort of trending down, and it was awesome for the time. But PHP had kind of moved on, and people wanted to use some of these newer PHP features. And so they started that, and I kind of started working on Laravel, actually, probably around the same time they started working on Fuel, actually. And even I remember I even like pinged Dan and asked if he wanted help on Fuel for certain features. It just never really worked out, and I still ended up doing my own thing.
So have you still got a lot of love for .NET then? Or is it just the fact that the setup process is a lot easier with PHP and it's kind of easier for other people to pick up? Or
yeah, I still like .NET. I find that like wherever you are, kind of the grass is always greener. So like if you're in .NET, like a dynamic language like Ruby or PHP looks really awesome. But if you're in PHP, a lot of times you hear them wanting like, oh, C# is really awesome. And so it's kind of always just kind of where you are. The other side looks better, but they both have so many unique strengths. Like C# is really cool and Visual Studio is really great. But overall, I'd say I prefer working in PHP, I guess, at least for the size of projects I'm working on, just at my job and then in my own time. PHP really suits them. If I was working in like a huge enterprise environment, I could see it being maybe a challenging environment to work in terms of just debugging and testing and like code quality. But
yeah.
So do you use Laravel for both at work then? Was it actually meant for work initially, or it was always just
So how that worked out is I was on Laravel version 2, I think, and I was still working at my .NET job, and I got an email from Ian, my boss now, that said, basically, hey, I'm looking to do some new stuff in PHP and Laravel looks really cool. Would you be interested in talking or whatever? And so that's how I got my first interview with Userscape, where I am now. And we build a help desk solution called Snappy, which is built on Laravel. And that's kind of how I got the foot in the door. So Laravel came first, and then I got hired at my job. And then we added a bunch of features to Laravel after that we needed at Userscape. So like we added database migrations and a queuing system, which we needed because we were sending lots of emails. And it's very similar in a way to like how Basecamp grew, or how Rails grew out of Basecamp. Is very similar to how Laravel kind of grew out of a lot of our needs at Userscape.
That's cool. That is very cool. And with so at college, then you used Java and C#. I suppose they were the primary.
Yeah, and my college was pretty old school, so we used C++, and there was one Java class and I think 1 or 2 PHP web classes.
And was that 5.3 stuff, or was it all 5.2 and below? And let's just use the old stuff. And
I'm pretty sure that was, gosh, I can't remember when 5.3 came out. I actually didn't take any specific PHP classes, but in college we had a project where we could pick any language we wanted to. And my team members happened to know PHP, so that's kind of how I got into PHP.
Wow.
But yeah, most of my professors were very kind of old school, though.
Yeah, I can definitely feel that. Mickey, you're doing a master's at the moment. You can. They love PHP, don't they?
They just slate it all the time. Yeah, but
they just don't know the right way.
I think that's it. But I'm doing C++ next year, so I'm looking forward to that actually, and seeing how different it is. But one of the questions I was going to ask actually was obviously because you've got that experience. For people who've only done PHP, would you recommend to them to try going to to the Microsoft stack temporarily and just learning a bit of C# and having a play?
I think it can be good. I think going to any other stack can be good, especially if it's quite a bit different than what you're on. So like PHP and C# are definitely very different. So it can be very eye-opening, and it kind of expands your mind in a way that even if you don't stay on C#, you kind of gain some new perspectives that help you with your PHP, I think, just how you organize your PHP or the way you write certain things. I know it's been really true for me, and even now, like I've been dabbling more in JavaScript and stuff at work, which I didn't do any front end for a long time, which really, I was kind of scared that I was becoming like too focused on back end PHP stuff. So I got into Angular JS, and even that's been really eye opening to use a different language like that.
Yeah.
Are there any features of C# that you would like to integrate into PHP? Yeah.
Sure.
Extension methods? One of them?
Yeah. Extension methods, overloading methods,
Yep.
link.
Oh, link is just amazing, isn't it?
That's probably one of the better features of .NET in general.
I was literally just looking at your website, and the bit you blogged on overloading methods.
Yeah,
that would be quite cool, actually.
Yeah,
Java
overloading.
boy.
Yeah.
That's probably the feature. Like in my day-to-day use, that's probably the feature I run up against most, is wanting to overload a method. Probably.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah. I mean, without it, you end up with stupid name methods. I guess that just get crazy and just longer for the sake of it. I guess, don't you? But,
yeah, I'm not sure. It's probably not even possible in PHP just because of how functions can be. Your arguments are so dynamic.
That's it. Unless you have type hinting or something along those lines. But I don't know deep down in the core that they could actually do something like that. But
yeah,
I think you take it, as you say, every language has its warts and its pros and cons. And yeah.
Cool. What about Java? Are you a Java fan at all?
I've never used Java, so I wouldn't really know. It looks so similar to C# though. Like
it's a worse C#. Don't worry, it's just it's a worse C#. It's C# that Microsoft actually do right there, where they actually integrate and update it like on a frequent basis. Java's the corporate, they're slow.
Yeah.
Finally got lambdas in 1.8. Oh dear.
Nice.
Oh. Yeah. One question I was going to ask actually is, how do you do you kind of everything you make you release and then it's magical, or do you have like a process of fate, like things working? Like how long did it take you to release the first version of Laravel? Was there a lot of work?
Yeah, there was quite a bit of work, and even since then, I would say the ORMs, even though Laravel's on version 4, the ORM's got to be on like version 15 or something like that. Like that's been rewritten and kind of rethought a lot of times because it's just such a big piece of the framework. And even Laravel itself, like I remember the routing engine went through a solid 5 or 6 iterations before I had something that I liked there.
Was it literally just chucking the code out and starting again each time?
Sometimes, for real, yeah. Especially with the routing, because that's less code. And even with the ORM, after I got to Userscape, there was one day where I threw out the whole ORM and just rewrote it basically because we were hitting some limitations and stuff. But yeah, we've been through several iterations on that stuff.
I was going to ask you, one of the things I was thinking, I know, like you were saying, and I really agree with the point you were making, that perhaps every developer should have a go at making their own framework to kind of understand that. And that's kind of like a running theme that we have in our podcast, because we're primarily looking at beginner programmers. It's something that Lou's done, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute. But I do agree it's a really good process. But for me, I think if I was to sit down and do that, I'm such an indecisive character that I would probably spend days thinking about how I wanted that to work.
And then I'd give up. That's my thing.
Well,
I'd be like, I can't think of what I want to do.
I think it would be the design pattern side of things. I'm thinking how to do it, and
naming of things would be my thing.
Yours would all be cheese, and then none of us cheese one. Yeah,
cheese namespace.
Was that the case for you?
Namespace.
Or did you have a pretty good vision of what you wanted?
No, a lot of times there are. I mean, I had an overall vision, I would say, but a lot of times, even now, like there are pull requests where from the outside, I'm sure it looks very simple. Like, why wouldn't he merge this simple new method or new thing? But to me, especially now that Laravel's really got quite a bit of adoption, that name is in there for a long time. So, like, I have to be really careful with deciding where things go and how things should be organized. And sometimes pull requests sit out there for a month just because I'm still trying to think about if this is a good idea on some simple little thing.
Do you still enjoy it? Do you find that can be a bit too stressful at times, that you're now you've got like the weight of all these people on you almost?
Yeah, it can be stressful for sure, especially like let me think. I think people kind of lose perspective a little bit, I think, where not to complain too much, but like I think people get a little bit spoiled like in how much is really being done for them. Absolutely. And they have trouble like doing a simple thing kind of on their own, because of course you can just because you have the framework doesn't mean you can't still add your own code on top of that to add whatever features you want.
Which is exactly what you were doing with CodeIgniter when you started. Yeah, so sometimes that can be a little frustrating, and it's really hard to say no to pull requests. Even still, like someone put time into doing it, and to have to say like this just doesn't really fit, in with where we want to take things. That's still pretty hard. But
seen on Twitter, you've taken some heat for that as well, which I thought has always been a bit unfair.
Yeah, Twitter. I don't know. It's just it's a mix, It's when you write something like a framework and it's so much tied to
your personality
your personality, your intelligence, how you feel about things. And in a way, like to insult the framework is to like basically you identify yourself with that code. So it's basically like insulting you. And so, I mean, I do take things too personally, I think sometimes, and it's hard to separate yourself from your code and view them as two distinct entities. That
I think that's totally right. I mean, every developer, no one likes, exactly, being their code's rubbish or something. It's especially on that scale. And as you say, you're giving it for free. I don't know why people have such a, as you say, it's entitlement maybe.
I think code is like so much a thing of the mind. It's so unique. It's not like it's not something physical. It entirely comes from your head. And so when people insult it, it's hard not to associated with you as a person.
And you never signed up for thee to be this popular. I think that's another thing, isn't it? It's not like you're saying, I know what I'm going into with celebrity, become a, it's, you're just a normal guy who just it just so happens it became popular and but I mean, you're taking.
Overall, of course, everything is really positive and everything is pretty good, but it's hard to, you can have 100 good comments, but one bad comment can really like ruin your night and you're just like, cussing the rest of the night.
It's like, I hate this. Yeah,
I hate the world. Yeah.
It's weird. It makes me a lot more reluctant to kind of get involved in some certain discussions because I've seen how volatile it can be. And I mean, I've only been in the industry for 3 years now, and it's really surprised me that actually. I came from golf before, and that was a very volatile environment at times with people getting technical over things like the golf swing, and that could get really heated. But I never thought it would happen with something like this. It's really strange.
Yeah.
I mean, we discussed it many times, haven't we? But you think for like our kind of community in our industry that people will be a lot more receptive. But I mean, how many times have we talked about like some of those threads you see on Stack Overflow where someone's just slating someone's response when really they've given up their spare time to try and help someone else? It's just brutal.
You mentioned earlier on, Taylor, about messing around with CodeIgniter and stuff. We had Dale on last week. Dale Reese, your friend and colleague, and I said to him, like, what kind of things would it be good to ask you this week? And one of the things, well, the first thing he said was he said to mention monkey dust.
Yeah,
and
he introduced me to that. He introduced me to monkey dust, which I guess is one of your sick UK things.
This is the bit. I never even heard of it before, and then he mentioned it, and I started watching it. It's quite funny.
He introduced me to that in Amsterdam. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, the combination. I did watch Devil Loans though. That was funny. But another thing that Dale said, like, it'd be good to ask you, like, your process of thinking up like the new features with Laravel, and that kind of goes into one of my other questions, like, do you find yourself exploring some of the other frameworks and the code there, and for inspiration and ideas, or are they just literally ideas that come into your head, or where does that come from?
No, especially in the beginning, I really did look at other frameworks a lot. Like if I had an idea, like for example, I can't remember what version it was, but we added resource controllers, which is something that Rails does. And so basically the first thing I did was go to the Rails documentation and see how do they do resource controllers. And we pretty much did them the same way. Like that was not innovative at all. But and then with routing, I looked really hard at Sinatra, which is another Ruby framework. But then, of course, for templating, I looked at .NET. So it's a pretty big mix, I guess, mainly Ruby and .NET. I haven't looked at too much from other things like Python or anything like that. But yeah, I look at that a lot. And now Laravel's kind of to the point where we're not always adding new features that often. And the features we do add maybe are not in any other framework. So like the queuing stuff, that was something that wasn't really in any other web frameworks. So that was kind of, we had to kind of design that ourselves. But yeah, it's a mix. And mainly I would say it's looking at other frameworks, but there's a mix as well.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Ed's probably out of the three of us. I mean, Ed's been champion Laravel from day one since I've known him, I think, and I've dabbled backwards and forwards, and I'm very much now getting back into it. I've been messing around with it this week and last week, and I haven't even got to some of the new things yet, like Homestead and Forge, but I'm very excited to try those.
Yeah.
Have you used them much yet, Ed? Or
I have. I haven't used Forge, unfortunately, but Homestead I have, and I do love. You've made Vagrant fun, and yeah, thank you.
I hated Vagrant for so long because it was just such a pain, and I could just never get it right. So, and we had the same problem at work, and we were all just like, we need one Vagrant box we can all share that takes like 10 seconds to start up, and yeah, that's what Homestead came from.
So, did you actually design and build that at work then, and then also release it open source, or?
Yeah, we worked at that at work a little bit, not the whole thing. I did quite a bit of it in my free time, but yeah, some work time was spent just like I work with a guy named Chris Fidel and also Eric Barnes, and Chris runs a newsletter called Servers for Hackers, so he knew, he was pretty knowledgeable on provisioning servers and stuff. So we kind of talked back and forth about what would make a good Vagrant box and stuff like that. But yeah, and then a lot of it was spent on my free time in terms of actually packaging up and uploading it to DigitalOcean and all that.
That's cool. And Forge then, would you like, I don't know if maybe listeners would like to know what Forge is, the direction of Forge, and...
Yeah, so Forge is basically, it's kind of like a poor man's Heroku in a way. It's like a provisions DigitalOcean servers or Linode or Rackspace or Amazon, and it actually creates the server using their API. So you plug in your API key when you sign up for Forge, and it installs things like Nginx, PHP, MySQL, Postgres, and some other software too. And then you have a lot of other cool features like push to deploy. You can start up queue workers. You can install an SSL certificate. It's very much like a modern cPanel for PHP or Laravel. That's kind of the gist of it.
When I saw the SSL stuff, I thought, yes.
Yeah. That's something that I kind of always had to Google in the past. Could never remember how to do it.
So you mean you don't even have to SSH, say it's a DigitalOcean box, you don't have to SSH in to install all those stuff. You can actually do that on Forge, can you?
Yeah, you can do that all on Forge.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's pretty nice. Like you would just buy your certificate and then you can paste it in, and Forge actually will SSH in, of course, and install it.
That must have taken ages to work with all the different APIs. Yeah, I was thinking that probably would have been the worst part, trying to...
Yeah, thankfully we only have a couple API calls. Like we have an API call to create the server and an API call to delete the server. But once we have it created and we need an API call to add an SSH key for Forge itself. But once we have that server up, we can pretty much manage it without making too much API calls. Yeah, but Forge took a long time to write. I mean, that was since way into last year, like September of last year.
And what made you kind of go for that? Was it the same thing like with Homestead? You just there's got to be an easier way of doing this, and you had no idea.
Well, like it's kind of going back to you have a startup idea and you want to launch it, but there's so many kind of roadblocks in your way. Which framework are you going to use? What's your local development environment going to be like? How are you going to launch it? Do you know how to configure a server? All that stuff is just headache. And if you can remove all that, then I think it makes people more inclined to try to build out their idea, and it makes they get less overwhelmed. Because if I have a startup idea and I think of all that stuff in front of me, like sometimes I'll just be like, screw it, I'm not going to do it. It's just not worth the time. But if I have something like Homestead and Forge and Laravel, then a lot of those roadblocks have been removed where I can have a good development environment, decent framework, and then I can push it out into production pretty easily. So it's just a really streamlined process.
I think that's great. I think that's really, as you say, like you want the weekend hacker being able to work on the weekend and actually get something built without all those roadblocks that everyone has to go through, which is a pain.
Yeah, it's perfect for that. And also I've seen quite a few like freelancers that they launch quite a few new sites. And so they'll use Forge to just quickly spin up a server, and it saves them quite a bit of time because they might be making, 5 or 6, 7 servers a month. And so that's really nice for them.
That's so cool. Well, one random question: where did the name Laravel come from? Because it's such a
that was kind of that was actually kind of totally invented. I've always had. I don't know. I was having such a hard time coming up with a cool name, and actually, at first, I think the first code name I had for it was like Boot Plant or something stupid like that. And I kind of gave up on coming up with a name that had any meaning, and just picked a name that sounded cool, and went with that. So it has no deep meaning or anything behind it.
Oh, you could just make it up now. You know, this is my spiritual name. You know.
Yeah, no, I need to come up with a cool excuse.
I still can't think of one. I think I'm just going to pick up a dictionary, open a random page, and then just put my finger on a word, and that'll be it.
And then you'll regret that word for the rest of your the rest of the project.
That's been the hardest part, actually. Trying to pick a name.
Oh, dear.
So would you say Forge has probably been the hardest component to make the whole way through then, or?
Yeah, that was a big project.
Was that all in your free time as well?
Yeah, and that was all on free time. That's why it took so long. I think if I was working on it full time, I could do it obviously quite a bit quicker. But yeah, and it was tough because I had never done front end before. So what I did actually was I wrote the whole thing like very ugly, just like plain HTML, and then I was just going to try to figure out the design when I got there, like if I even got that far, you know.
Deal with that when it happens. When it happens, yeah, it'll get in the future.
Yeah. And so then once I actually did get that far and I was like, holy crap, this is actually going to work. Then I had to learn Bootstrap and Angular. So
this was all your own project. You didn't, no one else kind of chipped in?
At the very beginning, Dale, for probably the first couple months, Dale helped me out. And he helped me figure out some of the basic provisioning stuff and SSH stuff and installing Nginx. He was a big help on all that. And then I kind of took it and ran with it and kind of pushed the idea, I guess, deeper than we had originally intended to go. Like at first we were just going to provision a server and that was kind of it, and we weren't going to do anything else. But then I kind of pushed it further into like installing SSL and queue workers and deployment.
And Dale's like, you're crazy, no. The mad scientist.
Yeah.
Who else other than Dale at the moment, who would you consider to be like your main sort of team, and you know, sort of what are their roles specifically within the whole Laravel operation?
Well, other kind of prominent members in the community would be like Jeffrey Way, who runs Laracast, which is huge, and he has hundreds of videos on there. So that's basically it's basically an educational site that has lots of Laravel screencasts and tutorials, basically on tons of different topics. So he's obviously a huge part of the community, even though he's not a regular contributor to the code itself. He's pretty instrumental in building the community. And then Sean McCool runs the Laracon in Europe, the Laracon conference in Amsterdam, and then also kind of heads up the Laravel IO site, which has our community forums and like a question and answer site. And then, of course, we have contributors to the framework, which there's been a lot of those, you know, that have contributed various things, probably too many to name, but those are kind of some of the bigger community members.
And obviously, I think Dale mentioned, though I don't know if it's still in the early works, about Laracon UK maybe happening.
Yeah.
That would be quite cool.
Yeah, that would be nice because I like to travel over there and see different stuff. So that would be really fun to throw out Laracon UK.
With Laravel Forge, are you right to talk about the stack and like what you use? Are you on DigitalOcean for it, Amazon? Like, how did you kind of go about that type of thing?
So Laravel Forge obviously does a lot of queuing, and the server setup is it's all on Linode, and it's 5 servers. There's 2 web servers, that's overpowered. Like I could probably drop one of those, but there's 2 web servers, a node balancer, and then a database server, and then 2 worker servers. And the one of the worker servers only does kind of provisioning, and then the other worker server only does your code deployments. And each of those workers has, I think, 8 workers going at once. So there's a total of 16 queue workers always listening. And the whole stack, I think, runs on 5. They're all 4 gigabyte servers. And Forge actually built all the Forge servers.
That is so cool. How meta is that?
Yeah.
Forge and the Forge.
It's a pretty powerful setup. I need to scale it down a little bit, but I didn't know how big I would need it when I first launched.
Did you find that have you had a good reception from it then when you first launched? And
Yeah, it's been pretty good. You know, I'm pretty happy with people's response to it, and it's had a pretty good number of signups. So I'm pretty pleased with how it's going so far. And I still have ideas I'd like to add to it.
That's what I was going to ask. Like, have you got anything in the pipeline that maybe?
Yeah,
I've got cool stuff.
I've got several ideas I want to do, but kind of this first month or two, I've been pretty busy with just kind of fixing bugs and answering questions and stuff. But now actually things are starting to really die down. Like I've only gotten like one email today about Forge.
And you're like, woohoo.
Yeah. So now I have more time, because a lot of the time at night, like I have to fix something or look into some problem and I don't have time to add a new feature. But yeah, there are definitely things I want to do. Like one of the things I want to look into soon is some kind of automatic node balancing from Forge.
Ooh.
And like a big thing, I don't really know if this would be feasible or if this would even be a good idea, but at some point I think it would be really cool to be able to manage your DNS from Forge, so that it's really, really easy to point a domain at your site. And I've even got crazier ideas than that, where like if I could contract someone to build like a Forge desktop app that you could just drag a folder to, like maybe up in your Mac menu bar, and that it would launch a server with that Git repository, like that would be really cool. But I don't have the skills, so I'd have to, after I raise some funds, I might be able to contract something like that out, which would be really sick.
Have you encountered anything so far with Laravel that you've really wanted to do but haven't been able to for whatever reason, or do you take confidence that you can create these new things because everything so far has gone well?
With Laravel, I do have one feature that I want to flesh out, and I'm hoping I can introduce it at Laracon in Amsterdam. It's nothing as big as Forge, but it's just kind of a new feature I've been thinking about for a little bit. But yeah, we'll see. A lot of the Laravel I feel like a lot of it is pretty feature complete at this point, but I think there's still a few things we can do.
I've got to ask, like, how do you have a life after doing all this, a full day's work, and then Laravel? Because I think this is probably the misconception, is you get to work on Laravel all day, people must think, but you don't. You have a full-time job as well. So, yeah, how do you balance it out?
Well, one thing that's really helped is Ian, my boss, gives me every Friday to work on Laravel, and that's not Laravel Forge. That's just like Laravel open source stuff. And so basically what that lets me do is every Friday I can work a whole lot of pull requests and issues. And so during the week, I almost never work on Laravel, the framework, at night anymore, like I used to. Now I just work on Forge at night. And I spend 8 hours on Friday, which is probably more than I would have spent during the week, probably doing all issues and pull requests and bugs on Laravel. And then, of course, on the weekend, I probably get another 5 or 6 hours at least.
You've got a wife and kids as well, and I just don't know how you balance this out. That's crazy.
Yeah, so like the past 2 weeks, I haven't done hardly anything at night. I've just like worked 8 to 5 and then
and then just crashed out. It's done.
Yeah, done nothing. Like laid in bed and watched Star Trek pretty much.
Hell yeah.
So, yeah, but I'll probably get back on it now that the conference is coming up. I need to probably get back on a few of these features.
I never understand why the guilt kicks in. Like the moment you treat yourself to a night off like that, suddenly you're lying there trying to watch Star Trek or whatever, and you think, I really should be doing that. I should be. That's me thinking that, and you're obviously running this enormous framework. So yeah, it must.
Yeah, my time during the week is kind of limited because I don't usually work on it until my wife goes to bed. My wife really likes to sew like clothes and stuff, so if she's working on that, a lot of times I'll bring my laptop out into the living room and work on it that way. But if she's not doing anything, then I wait until she goes to bed to work on stuff, just so I'm not like always on the computer. But then usually if she goes to bed at like 10, then I only have like a couple hours probably to work on something.
That's crazy. Well, you juggle it all. It's impressive. I'm not going to lie.
Has that been the biggest challenge with the whole thing, or has it been more specific things with Laravel that have been the biggest challenges? Or
yeah, it is. I mean, it is a time requirement, and the time requirements are, they're increasing a little bit. Working on Laravel on Fridays is obviously such a huge thing because you get so much more done than just working 2 hours, because you can get that whole 8 hours to focus.
You can prep for it, can't you, as well? You can say, like, I'm going to get that done, that bit, yeah.
Yeah, and so Monday through Thursday, of course, I can jot down ideas or just tuck things away mentally of what I want to get done, and then Friday, like, I'm pretty much ready to get a lot of issues done. So
with your work, then, are you primarily the PHP developer, or would you say then you're also JavaScript and the whole stack kind of?
Well, at first I was only PHP, and my buddy Eric Barnes, who works at Userscape as well, he did all the front end for our first Snappy, and then for our new Snappy iOS app, we built it using PhoneGap and a new thing called Ionic. which is like a front end framework that looks very native. And so I built all of that. And so that's how I kind of got into Angular and JavaScript and stuff. And now I'm a lot more comfortable on the front end. So like we're building a new Larajob site, like a job board for Laravel developers. And I've been doing some of both on that front end and back end. So it's kind of nice to be more well-rounded now than I was, because I felt like I was kind of only useful in one particular area back then.
So we're going to say a Laravel JS there, maybe framework coming out one day. You never know.
Yeah, I'm not that good at JavaScript.
Where do you, with all this stuff, where do you find time to learn new stuff and like experiment? Because I suppose you've got all these commits and all these like problems to deal with, like saying, look, I want to spend some time just kind of hacking to, like when it was at the beginning where you were able just to hack for a bit and just see if things go crazy or not.
Yeah, well, like at first, I had a lot of free time to improve Laravel, but now more recently with my front end stuff, I kind of had to learn it, just because of work and stuff. So I had no choice but to dig in and try to learn it, and it was tough. But now I'm really glad I went through that, and now feel a lot better about it. But yeah, in terms of other newer stuff, like I'd really like to play with Go, but I haven't had the time to mess with it yet, and who knows when I'll have the time to mess with it now.
Do you ever have days where you're fed up with programming, or do you ever get that burnout?
Yeah, like fed up at Laravel. It's like screw this, and you just you just.
Sometimes, like sometimes, I think about like what would my life be like if I was just like doing a regular job. But overall, I think it was definitely a good career choice for me. And even though it can be stressful at times, I really do like it. Yeah. It's a lot like, I don't know, it's kind of like my Minecraft in a way. Like it's kind of my playground to do whatever I want. So it's kind of fun for me in that way.
Is there anything out of programming that you enjoy? Any other hobbies?
Yeah, I really like to play basketball, actually.
Hey.
That's my outdoor thing. I like to go hiking. In Arkansas, where I live, is pretty... people think it's really flat, but actually a big chunk of it is pretty hilly. I guess it looks a lot like what Dale shows me of Wales. But
we don't go to Wales. We don't go to Wales. No joking.
Yeah, so I like to get out and hike and play basketball and stuff. I usually play basketball a little bit at lunch every day, just to get some like actual oxygen.
Who do you support?
Gosh, I kind of like Miami's team just because of
course you do. Yeah,
they have the good player,
and then they opt out. But yeah, we'll see what happens there.
Yeah.
One thing I was going to ask when we had Phil on the other week, he was saying obviously when CodeIgniter came out, he was obviously doing quite a lot of consultancy work because there was quite a lot of demand out there for obviously companies, the business world, when it was taking up CodeIgniter for training. Is that something that you found that do you get a lot of requests for that kind of stuff, or is it something that interests you?
I get a few more than I used to, but I still get way less than I think people expect. Like I maybe only get like one a month, I'd say, of people asking, am I interested in working on a certain project? And, almost always I can't, but, I don't know if it's just, I see a lot of jobs out there, like on the forums, or even now I'm starting to see them more on more traditional like job posting sites. Like I've even seen some on Stack Overflow, Careers. And,
that must make you smile, though. It's like,
yeah, that's pretty cool.
It's so cool. It's like people actually ask for it. Recruiters and stuff.
That's one of my favorite things, actually, is to see, and just see those jobs out there. That's really cool.
Do you think that's a credit to the documentation then, that you're not getting those emails, that people can just go to the site and pick it up so quickly, I guess?
Yeah, I hope so. I'm sure. I think Jeffrey Way actually gets probably quite a bit more emails than I do, just because he's kind of the one doing all the learning materials. So I think he gets quite a few questions. And but I sit in IRC all day, and I'm actually really surprised. Almost no one ever messages me ever.
They're scared. They're like, no, we're not.
I know.
Jeffrey Way's doing a pretty exciting course on Laracast at the moment, isn't he? He's building Larabook. He's doing a tutorial starting off from installing Homestead right through to Forge and making Facebook in Laravel, basically. So it's
cool.
I imagine there's going to be a lot of people, myself included, going through that one.
Yeah, people always really... I remember when Laravel first came out, everyone wanted, like, do you have a blog example of, like, a blog written in Laravel that I can look at? And we heard that 1,000 times, I swear. And
the whole Ruby on Rails thing, isn't it? Yeah, build it in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you see yourself? Obviously, you've got great guys like Dale and Jeffrey around you. Do you maybe have in mind over the next few years that you might sort of step back a little bit yourself to let some of the other guys do a bit more, or do you still plan on remaining very much kind of at the forefront of it all? Or
Right now, I pretty much don't have any plans to change my role. As far as I can tell, I'll be involved, like I am now for a while, and yeah, because I'm pretty happy with where things are at, and I like kind of managing the code base and making sure like the vision for Laravel stays in place, and that we don't kind of wander off course either too bloated or too, or you can be like almost too minimal where you don't have anything useful really. So yeah, it's a tough balance. So I still kind of like to be the one that kind of maintains that balance.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
I guess that is really important point actually, because it must be tempting at times to put in features and then you think, well, if you put in everything that you wanted to, where does it end? Do you end up with like a smiley helper class or something like that?
Nice. How dare you?
Yeah, sorry, I shouldn't have referenced that, but yeah,
well,
I guess that's
one we get a lot. One feature we get a lot, or one request we get a lot, is stuff like we used to get a lot of MongoDB requests, and I really hesitated on that because it's so easy just to distribute that as a package, and now we have several packages for that, and other stuff like image manipulation. We could have like an image resizer thing, but now there's a couple great packages out there to do that. So yeah, you kind of have to be careful and kind of weighing that balance.
Pick your battles.
Yeah. I mean, I guess Composer's taken a bit of that strain away. I guess it's easier to kind of handle that, I guess.
Where would you stand with your recommendation kind of to beginners? Would you say to them go straight into using Composer and packages, or maybe try and make some of these things yourself to get a bit more of the basic understanding? Or
I guess it just depends what you want to do. If you just want to get stuff done, then probably it'd be better to go just straight into using a framework and packages and whatever. If you're looking to kind of grow yourself as a developer, I guess, then I guess you could kind of start writing some of your own stuff while looking at other packages to see how they do it would be a good thing to do. But yeah, in terms of just getting stuff done, I think it makes sense just to use something that's out there. So it kind of depends on your goals. Your goals is, are you trying to, build a business and make money primarily? Or are you trying to learn more as a developer? So it's going to be different approaches.
I've been backwards and forwards on it because on the one hand, if something breaks, I want to be confident that I can fix it. Yeah. But I don't want to deprive myself of using the best things out there as well. So it's trying to find that balance, I think.
Yeah, and I'm always really careful to not. I don't really like telling people what to do because I don't know. It's just like a free world, right? You can just kind of do whatever makes you happy. And if you're happy doing what you're doing, then that's all that matters, really. And if you're not happy, then you can change something. But as long as you're happy as a person and satisfied with what you're building, then that's really what we're working for, I guess.
Would you say you're around PHP for the long haul, or do you think that you'll move if another language, say maybe Python, or something intrigues you, make a framework there, or is it really PHP at the moment?
Right now it's kind of PHP or bust, I guess. Yeah. But I'm so I'm so entrenched at this point. But then also I think PHP's kind of improved so much that I don't find that really a bad thing now, since we have things like Composer and the language itself has improved so much and it's continuing to get cool new features. I think PHP really is in a good spot, especially since it's a very obvious, even though I think a lot of kind of programming architects would not really recommend it as the first language because I think it teaches bad habits. I think it's a natural first language because it's so easy. And so I think in turn, Laravel is in a really good spot because Laravel is a very natural landing spot in terms of PHP frameworks because it's very easy to learn, the basics at least, and it has good documentation. So really, I think PHP has a pretty high ceiling, and Laravel has a pretty high ceiling that hasn't really been fully realized yet just because of how many people are using PHP and how many people will probably come to PHP in the future,
That's quite interesting. We get a lot of people come on the show and kind of tout JavaScript as a good first language for people to learn. I'm with you really. I would say, well, either one of those languages, JavaScript or PHP, is a perfect kind of beginner
I think the
language.
way of saying natural language, I think that's totally right. Yeah, it just works, doesn't it? And I think that's what I kind of loved about PHP when I first started. Yeah, it may not be the technically, as you said, the greatest language architecturally made, and it does have some bad habits, but you can use it the right way. And I think that's what I was like with Laravel and stuff. You've kind of spearheaded a lot of the PHP world where people just building websites and stuff that, we started off very much just in a procedural way. Then CodeIgniter came on, we learned about MVC, and then you've come along with, unit testing and making it actually possible. And yeah, I think, as you say, it's a great kind of, we're in a great position with PHP.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, in the future, because I think a lot of it too is, the universities are going to play a pretty big part, I think. But when I came out of university, I knew how to FTP HTML files up to a web server, and it's like, oh, PHP works the same way. I can just FTP files up to my server, and then it works. And so it's a very natural kind of growth
you can just drag
from doing HTML to going to PHP.
It was really interesting when we had Dale on last week, because I asked him the question. I quite often ask this question to guests, but I always say, for a beginner programmer, do you recommend that they learn the language and then they learn a framework, or do they start with a framework? And the way that Dale put it, I'd never really considered before, but he said with something like Laravel, if you learn with Laravel from the beginning, it's going to encourage you to learn the right way. Because like I say, there are many parts of the language that you could go off in a bad direction, but kind of because you're using all the good stuff, it kind of puts you off in the right direction, I guess.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I think it does kind of obviously save you a lot of grief.
Yeah.
It can be a little confusing, I guess, because how people always gave jQuery developers a hard time because they don't know JavaScript, they only know jQuery.
Oh yeah,
blah blah blah.
I
guess you could have some of that in a way, Laravel, but you might not know PHP that great. But I'm always sort of pragmatic in the sense that I don't really care, and as long as people are getting stuff done, I don't really care.
And they can read the source. It's all available. I think that's the great thing. It's not like you're closing it off saying no one can see the magic underneath. It's if you want to understand how something works, then just look at the source, and it's a great learning tool in itself. If you get stuck with something, look at the source and see what's going on underneath.
That's how I learned PHP. Really, was looking at the CodeIgniter source and just seeing how they did a lot of things, and I learned a lot of PHP that way.
Do you have any sort of tips for navigating through the source code of Laravel? So obviously there's a fair bit there and stuff. Are there any kind of tools been put in place to maybe help that to people like me that quite like to look under the hood at these sort of things?
Well, we do have the API documentation online, but then also one kind of central point of Laravel is every component usually has a couple of classes called service providers, and those actually register all the parts of that component. So if you go to the database component, there'll be a database service provider class, and that one class will kind of let you see how everything is kind of tied together and works together. So those are kind of the good central spots to look in each component to understand how that component is actually structured and works.
One question was, what with building this thing and everything like that, what has been the most kind of the thing that people have struggled with the most? I think with 4.0, I think kind of things got a bit, people get confused with, I'm going to say facades and bring up that, where it's just stupid why they complain about the name of that. But what things have been the most confusing for people, with emails, sending stuff back, people have got the most?
Let me think. Gosh, I don't know. I don't get a lot of emails like that, but gosh, it's hard for me to think what would be a big problem area.
I think that's good. I think that's that's answered the question even better. I think that's great.
Yeah, I don't get a lot of emails like that because under the hood, 4.0 was a lot different, but on the surface, it was not very different because of the facades and stuff. It looked very similar. Yeah, so it was a pretty smooth transition there. People have quite a few questions, I guess, in terms of writing their own packages. When you get to that point and you're trying to do some pretty advanced stuff, a lot of times, sometimes I'll get questions about how to structure your package or tie it in with the framework or whatever. But as far as the core of the framework goes, I don't get a lot of I don't get a lot of stuff, mainly Eloquent stuff, how to build like a really gnarly query in Eloquent. We get that a little bit.
Do you sometimes just say, just write it in raw SQL?
Yeah, I really do, actually.
Sometimes it's
I just
like,
said that the other day.
Yeah, it's just like, write that in raw SQL. There's no point in, just write in raw SQL.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that would have been a great question if we got the guy who made Magento on. I think that'd be brilliant. You must get bombarded. If it's a single person, I don't know. But that would be a great thing for you, Taylor, actually, if you could make a nice
I love
e-commerce platform. Oh,
yeah.
We've got
Yeah,
cashier.
I get that. So... Magento must be really horrible because people tell me that all the time.
Oh, that's brilliant.
It really is. Yeah. Yeah, if you could do that. If you could do it this weekend
just in
as
your
well.
Free time. Yeah, it's like, it's not like it doesn't. That's a question I was going. Would you like to work on it full time, or do you like the idea of still having your day job and this being kind of outside of it?
Well, right now it's kind of nice being outside of it because obviously you get two income streams.
Yeah.
But if it ever, I mean, I don't know, just have to see. It's still manageable right now to do it outside of it, especially with Forge, which I didn't know how much weight Forge would be when I first launched it. I didn't know if it would be like 50 emails a day, but now that I can see that it's, anywhere from 1 to 5 emails a day, that's very manageable. And especially because I give very terse, like 1-sentence responses to most stuff. So
because you're
right now,
you just get things done. Yeah.
Yeah, and right now it's really manageable. And of course, I use Snappy to manage all the support on Forge, and I need to go in there and set up like phrases so I can just do like one word to give these canned responses. But
can I ask you a question related to unit testing quickly? Because I kind of started with PHP. It was my first language, and did that for a few years before I decided to go to university and study computer science. But it was only when I started learning Java that I got into the whole unit testing thing. And before that, it was practically unknown to me. But is that an experience that you had when you started learning PHP? Did you find that it was more like an afterthought compared to what it was with .NET and that kind of stuff?
A little bit of maybe. Like, I think it's... Well, let me think. I think some PHP developers view all .NET developers as like experts and really, really awesome at architecture, and that is not the case at all. Like,
really, that's how I think of you. Actually, yeah.
No, like I've seen some nasty .NET code, and that's very hard.
Plus one on that, yep.
And it's not tested. But I think the focus on testing, is. There's obviously a big group of people that use C# that are very focused on testing and architecture and stuff. And when I first came into PHP, I would say that it was less of a focus in PHP and more of an afterthought. Yeah. But now, I don't know if it's through just, PHP bloggers and different articles or whatever, but now I would say unit testing is just as much as focus as it was in .NET.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it just seems like the whole conversation has changed. Like a lot more PHP developers are talking about unit testing and various design things like domain-driven design, and now people are getting into like BDD and stuff like that. So yeah, things have changed so much, and of course, Composer didn't exist. Yeah. It's just a whole different world, really, than even just a few years ago.
When did you come into PHP then? Like, I know you did it a bit at college and stuff, but like afterwards saying, I want to start using PHP for my hobbies. Was it 1.3 or?
I came in on...
5.3, so.
Yeah, 5.3. It was 5.3. It was around 2011, late 2010, early 2011. Yeah, and 5.3 was out, so I never used PHP before 5.3, really.
You lucky person.
I know. Yeah, I got really lucky there. Like my boss was on, PHP 4 and stuff.
I was trying to see if I could find the changelog for PHP 1.3, but I can't find it.
Sorry,
anywhere.
1.3.
It would have been great to see what came
1.3.
in.
Yeah, that would have been awesome.
It was a solid personal homepage, Come on.
Did you watch the video series on TDD that was on the Google Hangouts recently?
TDD dead? I think it's
a little bit. Yeah, I watched it. I didn't watch the whole thing.
Yeah, it's the same. Yeah. What did you?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. What are your? Do you use TDD yourself or?
I don't use it. I don't use TDD very much. I do a lot of writing tests.
Yeah.
Laravel has, I think we're up to like 2,300 tests, but almost none of that was written with TDD. Most of those were written after the fact, and usually I write the code and then I'll write the test right after. And I don't know. It's just kind of the groove I'm in, and maybe one day I'll do more TDD. But right now, it works pretty well. And I do think about testing as I'm writing code. I'm always thinking about like, am I going to be able to test this code? Because I know I'm going to have to write a unit test for it. So I kind of write it in a certain style that I know will be testable, and then write the test after.
Yeah, I think that's your philosophy, Ed, right?
Yeah, absolutely the same. I think if it works for you, I think that's the thing with I think Ken Beck, wasn't it? I felt sorry for him because if it works for him that he wants to write the test first, that's great. But I'm on your camp, Taylor, where I'll write the code first, but obviously you always are thinking I better make this testable because I'm gonna have to write the test anyway, so I'm gonna have to refactor it, change it afterwards. So yeah, it's you're committing the same thing after. It's just the way you're kind of thinking of it, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think for me, a lot of times, like I'll have a code idea and I'll get really excited and like I'll start coding on that idea, and before you know it, like I'm too far along to I write the whole thing and then I'm done, and it's like, oh, now I got to write tests. But you just get excited about an idea and you want to start hacking.
Well, that's
it,
hacking it out, isn't it? Yeah. Especially when you're doing stuff like what you were doing, like frameworks. I mean, this is just new code. This is just an idea and like working on it.
Cool. Well, we're nearly coming up to the hour mark, guys. So if you've got like, I'm going to call this golden questions.
The golden questions.
The golden round.
The golden round. I do have my question. I think going back on to see what one feature from C# would you like to see in PHP?
Gosh, it's a toss-up between link and method overloading, but I know we'll never ever have method overloading, so I'll just say link.
Good choice.
How about you, Lee? Have you got your golden question?
I don't know if we kind of covered it. It was basically any brand new people thinking about getting into web development. Taylor, what would you suggest to them as their pathway?
Sign up for Laracast.
Yeah.
And, of course, assuming you know some HTML and stuff, gosh, what would be a good... What's hard for me is recommending things like if you don't know any PHP, which I guess is what Dale's kind of trying to do now. With his new book. I don't really know the resources there, but if you're trying to learn Laravel, definitely Laracast is like the best option for sure.
Yeah.
And Jeffrey's not paying me to say that.
Do you sometimes look at Laracast just to remember what you did?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I learned I learned how to use Gulp, the Gulp task runner. I learned that from Laracast.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
What's the pipeline for Laravel 5.0? Is that even is that conception yet?
Is that in conception? Have you got any weird scientific, science-like mad ideas?
No, that's really not even been conceived. Like I feel like Laravel 4.x is pretty solid, and honestly, I haven't had any plans for 5.0, which probably makes some people relieved because there was quite a bit of changing there for a while. But yeah, I think I can continue to add features this way for a while. And I mean, the only thing I can think of that would necessitate a 5.0 would be like some kind of radical shift in PHP itself to where we had to, we just had to have these new breaking features.
We had method overloading. Oh my God.
Yeah. If we had method overloading, that would be a 5.0 release.
See, I'm a PHP developer, so I need to go away and Google method overloading, don't I?
Yeah. It's basically where you can define the same method with different argument lists. And so it will call the right method based on what you pass in.
Oh, okay, cool.
So yeah, because of the data types as well. Of course, in good old PHP, we can't because we're like, we don't really know anything after the name. We just have whatever. Yeah. It's Thank you so much, Taylor, for coming on, spending your time. It's been great. Kind of the man behind Laravel, and knowing that you only. I can't still believe how you juggle all that stuff. It's beyond me. No idea.
Well, thanks for having me. That was fun.
Yeah. Oh, it's absolutely our pleasure. And like Ed says, we're grateful for everything you do with Laravel, and thank you for coming on tonight. It's been really, really great. So cheers.
Is there anything you would like to plug, or your company maybe, or?
Yeah.
I work on Snappy, so go use that if you need a help desk. And, Larajobs, on the Laravel front, if you're looking for a job or you have a Laravel position you're trying to fill, check out Larajobs. It should be up in the next week or so. That'd be a good spot to go check.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much again.
Laravel podcast is brilliant.
Yes,
as well.
That's another one. Add all these into the show notes. And well, thank you again, Taylor. It's been awesome.
All right,
thanks.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to 3 Devs and a Maybe. You can contact us at contact@3devsandamaybe.com or follow us on Twitter at 3 Devs and a Maybe.